Wario.
My name's Wario.
Some people call him Wario. These people are going to hell. I miss the Wario Land games, dude. Don't get me wrong, the WarioWare games are all heaters, and if I hadn't fucked around in DIY as a teenager, I wouldn't be a musician, but must Ware and Land be mutually exclusive? Having soundly achieved the American dream, Wario now lives out his days as a CEO, resting on his capital gains, but he used to get his hands dirty like a good working-class citizen. Where's that Wario of yesteryear who scours the land for riches and beats the fuck out of people? Admittedly, Wario World is my favorite and the one I grew up playing. There was an irresistible catharsis to being accosted by extra-dimensional Lovecraftian chaos entities and watching Wario just grab them and pummel them to death with his bare hands. It's the game that fostered a young Diana's growth into a lifelong Treasure Co. LTD glazer. Stop watching this gay video and play Alien Soldier. But let's be fair to Nintendo. In 2008, after 7 years of us all wondering where the Land series had gone, they outsourced to Good Feel and gave us Wario Land Shake It. Or if you're from the UK, Wario Land The Shake Dimension, or if you're Jason Sudeikis, just
Wario Shake.
Masturbation joke? Masturbation reference?
Wario Shake sports decadent animation courtesy of Production IG, a few standout music tracks of nasty funk, and Captain Syrup. Who doesn't love Captain Syrup? Despite all that, though, this game was sadly kind of a miss for me. It's not even a bad game, it's just, well, to be forthright, it's got class but no swag. You know a game that does have swag, though? It took me far too long to really appreciate the genius of 2001's Wario Land 4. It's no wonder a lot of people still refer to it as Wario's greatest aggrievement or whatever. People are still saying that, right? Though it precedes Wario World, 4 is the true swan song of the Land games. But enough gallons of cum have been spilled over how great the gameplay is. What I really want to focus on is its presentation. You can clearly see the beginnings of the Ware games taking shape here, and this is unequivocally the Land game overflowing with the most personality and also the weirdest and most experimental. This goes hand in hand with it being a huge flex from a technical standpoint. A lot of the stuff Wario Land 4 gets away with graphically and sonically would make you think it came late in the Game Boy Advance's life when devs knew the hardware intimately enough to push it to its limits, but believe it or not, Wario Land 4 came out only about 5 months after its launch, which is pretty early. That still blows my mind. But to me, the element of Wario Land 4 that most exemplifies everything that makes it great, technically, stylistically, and artistically, is its sound design. As someone with experience in music and sound stuff, I honestly believe Wario Land 4 is the kind of game that any sound designer or musician would sell their body parts on the black market for even a chance to be able to work on. Why do I believe that? Well, I made a video about it. Have a rotten fucking day, ladies and gentlemen, and a happy new year too. Hit it! Tell me, Diana, can I play with you? Tell me, Diana, can I see you?
Sorry, boys.
Funding for Diana's Room is provided in part by esteemed members of the Diana Fun Club. Access special behind-the-scenes Diana material. Pretend that you're friends with Diana by asking her questions. All for just $1 a month. Be the first of your friends to join and stoke the fires of their burning envy.
Give me money, 'cause I like to stay alive. It's Diana's Fun Club.
Something I want to get out in front of right off the bat is there's an essay about Wario Land 4's sound design by Wario Forums user Tahu Toa that covers a lot of the same things I talk about in this video. There is still a lot of information that's in my video but not the essay and vice versa, so I'd say it's a good companion piece to this video if you want to give it a read. I'll link it in the description. Anyhow, there's an informative and very cute interview about Wario Land 4's development with director Hirofumi Matsuoka, design team member Takehiko Hosokawa, and programmer Goro Abe. Exclusively in Japanese, of course, so I bugged my dear friend Alyssa to translate it for me. Thanks, Alyssa, love you. It's an interview that sets the tone for the game's production in two major ways. First, the interview is full of gushing about the Game Boy Advance's technical specs.
Smoother animation is a unique strength of the GBA, right?
Since its processing power is completely different, movement functions differently than it did for the Game Boy.
The amount you can fit into a drawing differs. You're able to draw with finer detail.
And graphics can be rotated or enlarged, so you can make make a small amount of drawings feel like more, or add a bit of 3D movement.
You get the sense they were ecstatic to stretch their legs on a system that was cutting-edge technology. The Game Boy Advance is Dad's Ferrari, and they're teenagers doing donuts with it in a busy intersection. Second, the driving force behind the Wario games has always been a kind of subversive punk rock attitude that takes the tropes of the Mario series and flips them on their head, which is something the developers imply they're only able to get away with because they're Wario games.
How was it being the director when it came to sound?
We had more freedom than you'd expect, actually. Especially since Wario is a character who does wild things that Mario would never do.
There's no clearer example of both of these ideas than Wario's voice. Wario's voice acting in Wario Land 4 is something I don't think I've ever seen presented in quite the same way in any other game. Stay with me on this one. Okay, look, you see this? This is a graphical user interface, and this is a directory, but you're not a dweeb, so to you, this is a desktop, and this is a folder, like this, and this. This is a basic example of skeuomorphism. All of a video game's presentational elements really are skeuomorphic in presenting the coherent illusion of a world with consequences. You may not die in real life if you die in the game, but neither does Mario, because he's a figment of an extremely deranged offshoot of productivity software. But a great way to keep this illusion coherent is presenting contextually triggered audio clips as though they are vocalizations coming from the mouth of a living being who physically inhabits a world which they are being actively affected by. I didn't really recognize this as a kind of skeuomorphism until I observed the way Wario Land 4 takes the concept and tells it to fuck itself. I've always admired the mechanics of Wario's voice in this game for being way more complex and layered than they even remotely needed to be. Martinet says Yahoo, you pick the best take, you set it to trigger when Wario collects a diamond, and you call it a night. That is, if you're making a video game for normal people. But Wario Land 4 experiments with randomly manipulating the pitch of Wario's voice clips in real time. And even mixing and matching chopped up bits of them.
Here I go! Wow, go!
Every time Wario laughs, it's the same clip of him saying ha, repeated at an incrementally lower pitch. That's really inventive, and arguably helps the game's skeuomorphism. These are ways Wario is made to sound more human while staying economical about cartridge space. But then it starts to become clear they were having way too much fun with this. Sometimes Wario's voice will have fucking stutter loop effects.
Good luck! Hey, go! Hurry up!
Sometimes his voice clips are so contextually randomized that he'll say yeah or laugh when he gets hurt. Or he'll grunt in pain when he finds a treasure chest. And this could maybe be attributed to a language barrier, but I don't think that's giving them enough credit. Wario's voice is approached not as cinematic Foley, but as a DJ's sample. I can see this making sense in some alternate universe where Wario's character was like, I don't know, a robot with a glitchy broken voice modulator, but no, there's no diegetic reason for this. They're doing it just to fuck around. The game is deliberately sabotaging its own immersion by calling explicit attention to the medium and practically shouting in the player's face, hey, Wario isn't real. This is just a bunch of noises. Video games are a lie. She will never call you back, Dennis. It's subversive, it's punk rock, it's Wario. How does a video game play music? Well, by the time of Wario Land 4's development, the two standards had been pretty well established. Streaming music and sequenced music. Streaming music means the whole song is just one audio file played by the game. This is helpful if you want music with more of a live sound because, the audio file can be a live recording of a human or humans playing the song, but it also takes up a ton of space, and there was a time when streaming audio was highly impractical on most cartridge-based systems, which is why the Game Boy Advance uses sequenced music. Sequenced music means that every song is basically a bunch of instructions that tell the game in real time to play sounds at specific times and pitches. For a lot of Nintendo's game dev history, these sounds were a guy saying fuck hundreds of times in sequence, which was then censored to create music. Nah, but really, proprietary sound chips in the console would basically bend noises into different shapes. That's your bleeps and bloops. The Game Boy Color had 4 PSG audio channels for these bleeps and bloops. The Game Boy Advance would supercharge this by adding 2 channels of 8-bit digital audio on top of that. Making music on the Game Boy Advance meant finding creative ways for all of these channels to work together, and the ways they worked together were up to the individual composer. Near as I can tell, Wario Land 4 makes the decision to have the digital channels handle all of the music and some of the sound effects, while the PSG channels handle only sound effects and never music. Though it's harder to get as natural of a performance out of sequenced music, the fact that it's just a bunch of data gives it 2 major advantages. It takes up way less space, and it's much easier to do what's called adaptive music. Adaptive music, or dynamic music if you're nasty, is the real-time algorithmic modification of music in a game, usually to adapt to player actions or changes in the game state. When it's done right, it immerses you more fully in a game's world by deepening the connection between your inputs and the presentation. Think the lyrics kicking in during boss fights in Metal Gear Rising, or like in Guitar Hero 2 when your uncle comes into the room and sings Smells Like Teen Spirit whenever you play Heart-Shaped Box. Adaptive music is kinda one of Nintendo's signature moves, and they'd been doing it for quite a long time, but the 6th generation is when they started to push the idea of adaptive music to its logical extreme, and Wario Land 4 is their most diabolical act of extremism. The ways that the dev team worked to modify sound with Wario's in-game status are the core of the game's weirdo charm. There are the obvious things, like how the transformations will do different combinations of things to the music, changing the pitch or speed, or adding that oscillating pitch warping effect similar to the fuzzies in Yoshi's Island. The music also speeds up whenever Wario is rolling in a ball. That's all well and good, but what pushes it over the edge to me are the subtler things that most players may not even notice. For example, several of the levels have different sections of the music that only trigger when you're in certain areas, and it's hard to pick up on because the transition is usually made totally seamless. Palm Tree Paradise has music that only plays when you're in the cave portion. Also, whenever you hit the ground in the game during a ground pound, there's a little wobble in the pitch of the music, almost like it's playing on a record player and you bumped into it. This is difficult to catch because it's usually covered up by the sound effect, but I swear it's there. You want to get fucking crazy nutso cuckoo bananas though? Every time Wario crouches, the music plays slightly slower. You could probably go several entire playthroughs of the game without noticing that. Here's the kicker though. If you stand completely still without moving for long enough, this happens. So many times this game just does something like this for no clear reason other than it's a good bit. What sort of sick freak would spend their time doing this? Ryoji Yoshitomi is the only person listed in the credits as having done the music. That solo credit, as well as Yoshitomi's long career doing both music and sound effects, led me to believe that Yoshitomi was also responsible for all of Wario Land 4's sound effects. There's a high level of consistency between the game's music and sound design, and the game is unique in that there are even a lot of parts that blur the line between what's music and what's sound effects. There's not a lot of first-hand information or any interviews my non-Japanese speaking ass could find, but Yoshitomi's longtime involvement with Nintendo hit an early peak with Mario Paint, for which he's credited as sound staff. In a cute moment of history tying itself together, the lead staff of WarioWare DIY did an interview and gushed about how the robustness of the tools in Mario Paint inspired not only their game, but their game dev careers. It makes total sense to me. The spirit of a Nintendo that would make an art toy for the masses, slap Mario's doofy face on it, and ship it to every electronics store in the world most clearly lives on, if anywhere, in Wario's garlicky little world. It is a little bit of a shame that as Nintendo got bigger and more ambitious with sound, the sound crews of games got larger and larger, and older staff members like Yoshitomi, who at one point were solo composers with singular creative visions, gradually started getting more supervisory roles on larger sound teams. Internal corporate restructurings at Nintendo have moved him between teams a lot, and he's rarely gone a year without some meaningful credit in the 21st century, but Ryoji Yoshitomi isn't credited with any music composition since the PlayOn Media Player. I get it, games have bigger budgets, a bigger audience, more potential customers to pay larger teams than ever before, but it's a bit of a different vibe, with changes in game sound and corporate oversight shifting into more design-by-committee decision-making as opposed to the weirdo tastes of individual audio nerds. The convening of circumstances being what they were, we may never see the like of Yoshitomi's one-of-a-kind approach on this scale ever again. It's all the more important to recognize the things that he brought when he got the opportunity, especially when it comes to the music. Wario Land 4's devs mentioned that a really significant portion of the cartridge capacity is taken up by songs, and I believe it. The most prominent genres in Wario Land 4's music are like blues and soul, with this being the game that pretty much cemented Hammond organ and brass as Wario's bread and butter. But this is a soundtrack that, while still surprisingly cohesive, is about as eclectic and uncategorizable as it gets. You got some folk, you got some country, some funk, some jazz, some drum and bass, some metal. You've even got experimental ambient soundscapes, noise music, what might be called musique concrète, if that's even an applicable term. But trust me, we'll get to that. It's always a fun test of my music knowledge to try breaking down the ways in which a video game soundtrack may have been influenced by music outside of video games. Though I'll be the first to admit that funk, blues, and soul are all sort of blind spots for me, so feel free to beat my ass in the comments if something I say sounds incorrect. But to my ears, the music for Hall of Hieroglyphs bears a resemblance to Green Onions by Booker T and the MGs.
You play ball like a girl!
And the cacophony of clock bells whenever you step on a frog switch sounds like a nod to Time by Pink Floyd. This same cacophony is extended in another song, Yesterday's Words, which is even more of an explicit reference. The funk-laden sound of Fiery Cavern is comparable to something Casey and the Sunshine Band or Graham Central Station might do. And Toy Block Tower cranks up the soul influence. It reminds me most of Everybody Needs Somebody to Love, originally by Solomon Burke, but it sounds closer to the more well-known Blues Brothers version. There's another excellent video on Wario Land 4 by an oomphy of mine named Lute, and in it they briefly show a chart of albums that personally remind them of Wario Land 4's soundtrack. Even from a glance, it's a list that demonstrates a deeply informed and eclectic taste on their part, and I felt like a kid in a candy store listening through these and trying to hear the Wario in them, so to speak. Most of these don't invite a ton of direct compositional comparisons to Wario Land 4, it's more of a textural similarity, but either way I figured I'd offer my thoughts on a few of them. Herbie Hancock's 1973 fusion jazz funk classic Headhunters is Wario right out the gate. The song Chameleon is driven by a squelching bass line on an ARP Odyssey keyboard, and several songs in Wario Land 4 use a synth bass that sounds nearly identical. I wouldn't be surprised if this album was a direct reference point. Miharu Koshi and Haruomi Hosono's 1996 album Swing Slow is space-age lounge jazz with synthetic instrumentation that gives it an uncanny plastic sound that I really like. I hear Swing Slow in the jauntier, more swingy Wario Land 4 songs like Palm Tree Paradise and Domino Row. The 2000 album Gift by Hanayo intermittently shifts from melodic and quaint to terrifying, so obviously it quickly became a new favorite of mine. Gift sounds like the weirder side of Wario Land 4's soundscape. I hear the game's music in Gift's sparse, clicky drum machines, its groaning synths, and its squishy bass, but there are a lot of instances of noise manipulation that wouldn't sound out of place as Wario Land 4 sound effects. Also, the eerie way Hanayo's vocals are processed often makes them sound like they could be coming out of a Game Boy Advance, uncannily like vocal samples from Wario Land 4. The 1989 album Boomerang by The Creatures cooks with a lot of the same ingredients as Wario Land 4. The usual squishy synth bass, a lot of brass, some weird jaw harp, what sounds like Yamaha DX7 electric piano, and rhythm sections that oscillate between sparse drum machines and really frantic, crowded Exotica-style percussion. It's a unique and compelling listen. But the album that surprised me the most was Bjork's 1993 album Debut. There are so many ways this album is a sonic dead ringer for Wario Land 4 that it really does make me wonder how direct an influence it had. For instance, the little drum beat that triggers when the store clerk uses your item before a boss fight seems like a descendant of Human Behavior's rolling snares and timpani percussion. Later on in Human Behavior, we get some robotic and stilted uses of a distorted guitar sample that sound like the way Wario Land 4 uses its distorted guitar samples. Aeroplane has like a swamp ambience throughout, and that combined with the song's laid-back rhythm is suggestive of Monsoon Jungle. There's also a lot of vibraphone samples on both Airplane and Crying, which I swear are the same Roland Sound Canvas vibraphone samples that get used throughout the game. But then we have Big Time Sensuality, which does not sound like any specific Wario Land 4 song, it just is like Wario Land 4. It's fucking crazy, dude. Like, go listen to it. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention the flood of astute Wario Land 4 core album suggestions in my comments. One I want to give particular attention to is 1981's The Tunes of Two Cities by prolific weirdo art rock outfit The Residents. The album is a suitably odd back and forth between cavernous industrial soundscapes and stumbling toyetic cocktail jazz, largely courtesy of the at-the-time cutting-edge EMU emulator sampler. The emulator's stilted sound is both mechanically and sonically an ancestor of later sequenced video game music, and there is a wariosity to be observed in the album's delicate vibraphone, buzzing brass, and kooky, delay-drenched beds of experimentation. Also, the cover art is pretty cool and fits the music well. I did make a Spotify playlist of a bunch of these songs, which is a combination of cherry-picked stuff from Lute's album chart, suggestions from commenters, and some of my own observations. I'll link it in the description, and if anyone else in the comments has any suggestions for songs to put there, feel free to let me know. Like I said, sequenced music in video games is a bunch of data that tells the game how to play back samples. But Diana, you ask, where do said samples come from? Well, most samples come from stuff like keyboards, sound modules, and CDs of licensed stock sound effects and samples. If you've ever wondered why you often hear the same sounds in multiple different games, it's because all of these things are commercially available for anyone to buy and use, and there were a lot of CD sample packs that were especially popular in game development in the late 90s and early aughts.
Well, it's the lyrical paragraphs, your tracks make me laugh, you're front of the mic.
As an example of the widespread use of these sample packs, consider comedic collaborative music project Siva Gunner. At first, the artists behind it did shit like replacing the main riff in the Delfino Plaza theme with snow halation, but it eventually became its own thing for archivists and music nerds, inadvertently jump-starting a passionate community who combed through game soundtracks on a search for the sources of every sample they used. Another thing people started doing was using this information to make remastered versions of video game music. Samples on older hardware obviously have to go through a lot of crusty compression to stay economical about storage space, but if you have access to the original samples used to make a song, you can recreate it from scratch in the highest possible quality. A person named Wario did this with Wario Land 4's soundtrack, and they did a pretty good job, especially absent any kind of official soundtrack release. Plus, most of the circulating audio files of the OST are missing some bits or have traces of in-game sound effects. I will say though, there's something a bit off about a particular lead brass sample in these. It is the right sample, it might just be the way it's cut or the way the Advance's hardware compresses it that makes it sound different. I did try messing around with this myself at some point, but couldn't get the results to sound much better. One of God's little mysteries. I mentioned it in passing before, but Wario Land 4 makes heavy use of the Roland SC8850 sound module, and anyone who knows game sound from the turn of the century shouldn't be surprised. Roland's Sound Canvas series of sound modules defined so much of the late 90s and into the early 2000s, especially in video games, though it was at CMI Fairlight levels of ubiquity. It feels like around this time, whenever anyone needed an orchestra sound but couldn't afford a real orchestra, the Roland Sound Canvas was the go-to. The game also uses a lot of weird stock vocal samples, one of my favorites definitely being this Dow sample, which appears to be from the third CD in a set called Spectrasonic's Vocal Planet. You might also recognize that sound because Tyler the Creator was apparently digging around in the same sample CD when he was making Igor's theme, as if I needed more reasons to love this album. One of my favorite things about Wario Land 4's soundtrack, and one of the reasons it hogs so much space, is it has songs with lyrics. That's right, fuck you, Rental Floss, this game did it for you. To all you video game soundtracks out there after my maiden heart, whisper the words original lyrical song into my ear and I'm yours. I find that the charm of a video game's insistence on a lyrical song is inversely proportional to the processing that powers it.
Sound data is pretty large, right?
It's really large.
It's even larger if there are vocals.
Normally, vocals would never be allowed.
The less space you have, the more meaningful the use of that space becomes, and that Wario Land 4 believed music was this meaningful is the reason it makes me cry hearing this little plastic brick sing its heart out to me. The first thing that grabs you are the vocals in the intro music. These are actually a combination of stock vocal samples from two separate CDs, MIDI Mark Productions' Vocal Bites and Zero G's Vocal XTC.
Here I come, look out, here I come.
Put your hands up.
Now work it, work it.
Hearing these at full quality finally makes me feel like a complete person. But Diana, I hear you say, these are not real lyrics, they're just mixing and matching stock vocal samples. Well, alright, wise guy, why don't you say hello there to Meta Miyake, or Sunny Side Up, otherwise known as the theme for Palm Tree Paradise.
Hello there.
A fully original lyrical song with vocals playing from your goddamn Game Boy Advance speakers, it's fucking awesome! The fact that it's so out of place, not just on the console, but in the game's tracklist, and that it comes so early is one of those bizarre touches that's just so Wario to me. So if the game's music is all sequenced, how the fuck did they have a vocal track that runs through the whole song? Well, you may have already figured it out, but they literally diced up the entire vocal track syllable by syllable into separate audio clips and just triggered them all in order. Well played. There are two female Japanese names listed in the credits under voice, Junko Yoshitomi and Ayumi Shimokawa. Frustratingly, neither are listed for specific contributions, so we can never truly know who did what, but given the first WarioWare game reuses bits of Meta Miyake's vocal track and Yoshitomi is in the credits of that game but not Shimokawa, I would assume that the main vocal bit was Yoshitomi. The hello there at the beginning kind of sounds like a different voice actress, and to my knowledge it doesn't come from any pre-existing sample CD, so it's possible that's Shimokawa. This is supported by the fact that Shimokawa's only other credit is on a 2006 Nintendo DS kanji dictionary application called Kanji Sonomama DS Rakubiki Jiten, where she provided voiceover work in a pretty fluent American English accent.
Hello. There.
I'm getting off topic though.
Fuck.
There is another vocal track in the game, but, well, maybe we'll save that for the end. First, I want to go over what is surely the technical and artistic centerpiece of Wario Land 4's sound. In every level of the game, there's a treasure chest with a CD inside. Once collected, these CDs can be listened to in a place accessible from the map screen called the Sound Room. Now, in any normal game, this would be a sound test, where you could play back a given stage's soundtrack as a reward. Every level in the game has a CD, so each CD must be that level's music, right? Right? With a few exceptions, every CD is a completely unique piece of music that you don't hear anywhere else in the game. And not just any music. Weird music. Far removed from even the eclecticism of the rest of the OST. There's a lot of reasons why I love this. The sound room in Wario Land 4 is not only a deconstruction of the idea of a sound test, it strikes me as a deconstruction of the idea of unlockable bonus content in games. Usually there are like 3 routes most games go with unlockable stuff like this. There's meta stuff, like a sound test or being able to look at behind-the-scenes stuff like production materials or concept art. There's lore crumbs like journal entries or other stuff that fleshes out the story or characters. Then there's stuff that directly affects the game. Unlocking a new level, character, gameplay style, difficulty level, ending, costume change, but the sound room in Wario Land 4 is one of the only rounds of unlockable content I've seen where the stuff you're unlocking has nothing to do with the game you're playing, and it takes a game as weird as Wario Land 4 to make you think, yeah, that makes sense. The CDs are just meant to be experienced as pieces of art unto themselves. You think it's weird that Black Star released an album that you can only listen to on the podcast platform Luminary? You think it's weird that Kanye released an album exclusively on his STEM player? You think it's wild for your friends to link you to their Bandcamp? Well, I think Ryoji Yoshitomi has them all beat, because to hear his album, you have to get a fucking Game Boy Advance and beat Wario Land 4.
Game Boy Advance?
It would be noteworthy even if these were like normal songs, but they're songs that push the boundaries of an average millennial Nintendo fan's idea of music. Sadly, this kind of ambient sound collage and abstract electronic experimentation is another huge personal blind spot for me, so I couldn't pick out influences for every single track, but my closest guesses for overarching influence might be like Nurse with Wound or composers like Steve Reich. There's a lot of One-O-Trix Point Never songs that sound like a few of these too, but he wasn't active until 4 years after Wario Land 4's release date, so that rules him out as an influence. Maybe he was influenced by Wario Land 4? I mean, he does apparently like the Evergrace soundtrack. Influenced by experimental music or not, it's clear that the Sound Room's offerings were driven more by a desire to challenge and experiment with the limitations of the hardware, or to see just how close they could get an artificial MIDI soundscape to sounding natural and human. But the presentational context for these soundscapes as in-universe audio CDs leads me to believe that this stuff was influenced by musicians, unless that's like part of the joke. Either way, if anyone in the comments has any suggestions for artists that may have influenced this music, I'm all ears. And speaking of the presentation, works of fiction or art within works of fiction or art might be one of my favorite tropes, and I fucking love that each CD gets its own fake album art. It adds so much flavor, and it sort of fires your imagination wondering, like, are each of these supposed to be singles, or are they each presumed to be one song off a separate album? If so, what would all the other songs on each album sound like? It makes KK Slider look like J.G. Wentworth, and I love these little animations that play at the top during each CD. You get stuff like rudimentary animations of various objects manipulated with what look like Photoshop filters, and there's also real-life people dressed as Wario wiggling around. What? Why? Hell yeah.
When you collect CDs in the pyramid, you unlock the ability to listen to them. And just for fun, the sound room includes photos of the staff in Wario cosplay.
Oh, they're all actually staff members. That's really cute. You also get cute little animations of the Mr. Game & Watch shopkeeper, and in a total commitment to Wario Land 4's beautiful alternate reality, he's a DJ in one of them. Imagine the crowd for his Boiler Room set. In the clearest case of direct influence, a commenter pointed out that the CD About That Shepherd could very well be a parody of the 1990 album Chill Out by anarchist electronic group the KLF, down to its cover. Despite being a group of long-haired, money-burning hippies, the KLF are wildly influential in electronic pop history, and Chill Out fills in a lot of missing pieces for me about the kind of music that Yoshitomi was likely drawing on for the sound room. If debut most obviously mirrors Wario Land 4's swag, Chill Out is a double of its class. The album has distinct tracks, but the way it combines found sound, ambient fields, sampled vocals, and spare instrumentation feels like a prototype of this element of Wario Land 4's sound. In particular, About That Shepherd obviously parodies the track 6 Hours to Louisiana, Black Coffee Going Cold, which samples a barking dog over pastoral ambience by turning up the dog barking so fast it sounds like it's about to explode. Some of my favorites of these CDs actually tell little stories with just sound effects. On the Errand, we follow someone's footsteps as they walk through various locales, each with its own vivid ambient soundscape, and they bleed into each other seamlessly. It really does feel like you're walking through a busy city street, then a harbor, then a swamp, which is seemingly a nod to Chill Out's album-spanning conversation between rural and urban ambience. A few CDs convey seemingly very specific ideas that are otherwise shrouded in mystery. The short Futon has unintelligible whispering, intermittently broken by the sound of a door opening, a bit of ambience or a random sound effect, and then a door closing. This prompted some of the most wide-ranging interpretations I've seen. A diff who uploaded the track to YouTube theorizes it may be about a disgruntled couple trying to have sex, but they keep getting interrupted by random stuff at their front door. But the comments of the upload are full of different theories. Isaac3002 suggests it may be about two children whispering to one another around bedtime and pretending to sleep every time their parents come in to check on them. Lemon-flavored spermicide theorizes it's about two people inside of a fridge or a coffin who end up in a different place every time they open it. And Glenn Hilton suggests it may be about two people trying to find their hotel rooms late at night and checking different doors, which is the closest to what I think it could be. It's notable that the snippets of ambience encourage the listener to think not of different rooms, but of different locales or biomes. There's somehow a suggestion of non-linear space or time created here just through sound. Is this CD a recording of Mario finally wreaking his revenge on Wario and trapping him in the internal plexus? Or maybe it's like the funny doors in Yellow Submarine.
It's all in the mind.
Leave your theories in the comments. Every instrument in the judge's feet is played at a peculiar rhythm that exponentially speeds up and then stops, which is obviously meant to sound like an object losing momentum as it's bouncing on the ground. There's a similar trick in the Aphex Twin song Bucephalus Bouncing Ball, which this track is probably referencing. There's an inherent musicality about the sound of an object bouncing that I never picked up on until I heard this, and it makes me wonder how just the tempo at which a sample is played being altered in a specific way conjures such a vivid mental image of something bouncing. It really takes advantage of your associative memory. The closest thing to a CD with music actually from the game is Soft Shell, an extended version of the bonus room music. I've always found this song hilarious in its mind-numbing elevator music-esque banality, especially juxtaposed with how much pain you're inflicting on this poor old man just to get your big diamond. The song's use of weird samples and short, repetitive phrases is comparable to the work of minimalist composer Steve Reich. The main ostinato is even very similar to a Reich composition called New York Counterpoint I. Fast. The moon's lamppost may sound weird and scary, but it's actually Meta Miyake backwards. Being a sequenced song, this is more complicated than it sounds. Did Yoshitomi write an algorithm to automatically reverse the order of the notes, or did he have to manually input every note of the song backwards? And for that matter, if you actually record the moon's lamppost and play it back in reverse, why doesn't it sound like Meta Miyake 1-to-1? Are some of the samples reversed and some not? Is the song's subtle reverb affecting anything? Are we alone in the universe? I've been awake for 3 days. There's no greater evidence of Wario Land 4 as a sound designer's dream project than the sound room. Imagine getting the level of freedom that would allow you to just go fucking nuts like this. I don't want to understate the amount of hard work that goes into a game, but every aspect of Wario Land 4's sound feels like Ryoji Yoshitomi's toy box, and every technical stricture is an opportunity to fuck around. The soundtrack may be totally off the wall, but it also feels deeply personal, and there's an unabated passion for music and sound effects in every note, every chopped voice clip, every weird pitch-bent sample. And it's a passion that reverberates through every piece of the game, from the convention-breaking gameplay to the wild mixed-media graphics. A passion that's clearly infectious. In much the same way that Yoshitomi would inspire his future co-workers, the kids who grew up playing Wario Land 4 are making games of their own. Indie titles like Pizza Tower and the Anton games iterate upon Wario Land 4's style and ethos with new, fresh ideas, which includes the sound department. Samples directly from Wario Land 4 are present, but often chopped up and used as aromatics to bring out the flavor of original compositions. Pizza Tower's soundtrack is equal parts Wario Land 4 and Hideki Naganuma-style big beat. What? And Anton Blast often augments Wario Land 4's influence with crunchy wavetable synthesis. Which accentuates the game's nods to Virtual Boy Wario Land. You can even hear them using the same pitch-bent laughing trick. That's so cute. It's just kind of cool, you know? It makes me wonder about the kids today playing Pizza Tower and Anton Blast and what games they'll grow up to make. Oh, God. Oh, this video's been going for a while. I'm getting sleepy. I guess that does remind me of what I wanted to close out with. Wario Land 4's ending credits music is the game going for one last flex with another lyrical song. Interestingly, there are actually 2 different variations of the credits song depending on whether you're playing the international version or the Japanese version. The Japanese version has, as far as I can tell, Junko Yoshitomi coming back for one last verse. But the international song actually brings in male vocalist James Mesber to sing vocals in English. Mesber's performance is amazing, and I'm not gonna lie, I really love these lyrics. There's never been an official transcript of the English lyrics released by Nintendo, but this is the interpretation fans seem to generally agree on, and it sounds right to me. The Japanese lyrics, however, were officially transcribed on the Japanese Wario Land 4 website. Alyssa helped me translate these too, and it looks like the lyrics of the English version are surprisingly faithful to the lyrics of the Japanese version. When you're translating the lyrics of a song, you have a devil's choice to make between preserving the structure and preserving the meaning, and I can't put into words how endearing it is that the song's meaning was so important to them that they went out of their way to modify the song's melody so it would work better. Think of the contemporary image of Wario from Nintendo's perspective. Wouldn't it make the most sense to approve lyrics that are strictly, snarky or comedic or goofy? Or it could have even ended up a jump-up superstar situation where descriptions of moment-to-moment Mario gameplay are forced into corny romantic metaphors. And there are examples of that sort of thing working exceptionally well, but Jump Up Superstar's lyrics come off a bit on the nose for me. I know, beat my ass in the comments. But instead of doing any of that, the English lyrics for Wario Land 4's credits are like oddly poignant and in so few words. The concept of waking up from a really good dream and struggling in vain to hold on to the fading memory of that dream before finally accepting the memories left you is so universal, and as someone who has an odd obsession with dreams, it's something I myself must have experienced hundreds or even thousands of times in my life, but I don't think I've heard a metaphor for it that quite matches the surreality and beauty of the dream melting into your pillow. And there's another layer to it as a whimsical metaphor for someone coming to grips with the sudden loss of something dear to them that they may have taken for granted. Maybe it's ironic given it underscores Wario greedily making off with hordes of treasure, but that irony somehow makes it even more affecting to me. This is a fucking Wario game on Game Boy Advance, dude.
But, look, guys, look, low-level play.
If you get the game's worst ending, well, sorta, it's complicated. This music actually segues into the music from Hall of Hieroglyphs, over which we get Mesmer rapping, or I guess doing almost kind of a beatnik-style spoken word. And what he says here is actually a reprise of these lyrics, but with a little bit added at the end.
The dream I had last night melted into my pillow. Made peace with the time I had forgotten, and cooled your head with the penguin, collecting the moonstones as we walk. A boat at a time, a feeling new. The sky has no roof like the sea has no floor. Pour avocado sauce on a long strip of cloud.
The lyrics that are unique to this part are a bit harder to make out, and they're more contested among Wario Land 4 fans, but they seem more overtly absurdist in a Psych-era Beatles way. It feels less like that feeling of the dream fading, and more like when you try really hard to relate a dream that's fading fast. That's poetry. Why is that poetry? It makes me wish I knew who the fuck wrote these lyrics, though, and who was responsible for translating them. It would seem likely that Ryoji Yoshitomi himself wrote them, and the only English name I can find in the credits apart from voice actors is a W. Trinan at the end of the special thanks, which more than likely stands for William Bill Trinan, a longtime English localizer at Nintendo. So he seems like the most likely candidate. Still, we don't really know for sure. And yet, up to its last moment, Wario Land 4 has a little more weird, needless, unbelievable, loving polish to show off, a little more heart to give, one last stupid dream to tell, from its artists to you, out of tinny little speakers. There's games I love more in this series, but maybe no one who made a Wario game before or after managed to put more Wario into their work. What can I do with that but love it? So maybe the next time you feel like popping Wario Land 4 into your SP, take the time to listen a little bit closer. Anyway, bye guys, bye. Don't forget to subscribe. The next episode will be with me using the toilet. Of the dream that I had last night melted into my pillow. I made peace with the time I had forgotten. If you call him Wario, you're going to purgatory.